Please welcome Dr. Buckley.
Thank you. Morning, everyone. I'm the one who's keeping you from lunch, I'm afraid. I'm going to change tacks. I'm going to talk about something which doesn't involve cancer. Okay? Something which is of great importance, and it's something which is as common as cancer, but possibly has less of a profile in the community. So I'm going to talk about using genomics to get ahead with intellectual disability. So just to reorient you away from the world of cancer into the world of inherited genetics, you'll all be aware that intelligence varies in the community. Some people are Einstein, some people are not. And you have a range of IQ scores, which is normalized around the population mean of about 100. So there are some people who are brighter, there are some people who are not. We're not really talking about this group of people. Talk today I'm talking about is right down here at the end of this spectrum of profound, severe, moderate and mild intellectual disability. By definition, all of these people have got IQs of less than 70. These people here, often, with moderate to mild intellectual disability, show some deficits in learning, the ability to maintain themselves and look after themselves, but basically they can pretty much, with a bit of assistance, can do the main tasks of daily living. These people, the profound to severe, are not. They are really totally reliant on other people in their family or within the community to provide their daily needs. There's good data that these people here, the moderate to mild group, really just represent the end of this population curve. These people, however, represent the outcomes of at least one adverse effect in their genomes. And so this is where intellectual disability hits genome sciences. So we're interested in finding out what the causes are for intellectual disability in that group. So, just to put you in perspective, it's a pretty common disorder. The Australian Institute of Health and Welfare estimates that about 3% of Australians under the age of 65 have intellectual disability along one of those axes from profound up to mild. Now that's about 183,000 children, or almost 600,000 Australians as we speak. So at any one time, just we took today as a point in time, at any one time, there are more people living with intellectual disability in Australia than there are people affected by cancer. Because it's a very complex disorder, we don't know a lot about it, and it has a lifelong nature, intellectual disability really represents one of those major unmet clinical challenges in Western medicine. The costs of this condition, or these conditions I should say, are enormous. The estimated economic impact has been calculated out by some folk in Western Australia, and it's estimated to be about $14.7 billion per year, which is almost 1% of Australia's GDP. Now, interestingly, 85% of those costs are carried directly by families. Both direct costs, just providing people with toys, replacing damaged furniture, all the standard sort of things, making sure kids get their medicine, get special foods, all that thing. And opportunity costs, because frequently one member of a married couple has to stay home and look after the kids, so they forego an income. And so it's been worked out that those costs are about $33,000 to $58,000 per family per year, both direct and the costs that are lost, the opportunities that are lost. But what that translates to is that these families are really some of the most vulnerable families in our society and stand at very, very high risk of falling into poverty and need our assistance, our government's assistance, right through their lives. Now, the traditional way of diagnosing these families has been to get a clinical geneticist, one of the experts that David was talking to in the previous talk, and to look at their medical test results and see if they can come to a conclusion about what's going on. Well, In fact, when you look at the efficacy of that, you can see down here just how productive that is. So these are a number of different studies, different parts of the world. They all show pretty much the same trend. The numbers are slightly different, but the trend is very similar. That, I'm just going to take the biggest study because that's the best data. They think that around about 1 in 5 families has a diagnosis. Okay, so 80% of people with intellectual disability who front up to a geneticist walk away without saying, yes, you have intellectual disability, but no, we don't know what's caused it. Okay, so that's a difficult thing for families, as you might be aware. And put it to you that if we had an 80% non-diagnosis rate in oncology or virtually any other area of medicine, there would be a huge furore about how inadequate those services are. I feel very strongly that diagnostic services need to be improved for these groups, for this group of people. So you've been hearing a lot about genomes this morning and genome testing and genome services that are going to be offered through the clinics here at the Garden. So what actually is the performance of genome diagnostics when you apply it to the intellectual disability group? Well, the Baylor College of Medicine has been doing pretty much this for the last few years, and their experience seems to be quite a good summary. That for groups of patients with complex neurological, which is what intellectual disability is, a complex neurological disease, and it's inherited, approximately a third, 25% to a third of patients have an identifiable cause. And that, once you have the cause, you can use to reassure people. You can tell people that, no, it wasn't that glass of alcohol that you took at 14 weeks when pregnant. It definitely wasn't that. You are not to fault here. People have got enormous unresolved guilt when they have a child with intellectual disability, as you might totally appreciate. That information can then be available for prenatal diagnosis. So it really adds back to families reproductive autonomy. It allows them to choose. They can make sensible decisions about what they're going to do with their next step in family planning, for example. And provides genetic counselling. So you can talk to other members of the family. You can provide plans for family management plans. You can estimate how long the person with intellectual disability is going to live. You can say, well, what is the risk of them becoming depressed? It's a good management planning tool. Overall, about 3% end up with far better management, and about 1% in the Baylor College experience end up with a totally new treatment that might be helpful. Now that system that the Baylor used has been put into practice in a clinic that I worked at in the Netherlands over the last few years. They took a two-tiered approach. They did the standard diagnostic algorithm on their cohort of almost 250 index patients with intellectual disability. They got all the clinical geneticists to see if they can get a clinical diagnosis. And indeed, they came up with pretty much the same numbers, that around about 20% of patients ended up with a diagnosis, 18% in fact, and 80% were unsolved. Then they took some of those unsolved ones and used the genomic technologies that you've been hearing about throughout this morning to see how much better they could do. Now, they didn't study everyone, but they studied, what was it? 58, wasn't it? They took 58 out of these people who are undiagnosed, and then they looked to see in how many of those could they actually get a diagnosis in intellectual disability, and they did in 24. So that's a 40% additional mutation. That's a 40% mutation detection rate. So that now is starting to look like a clinical service, isn't it? Okay, so you've leapt from having around about 20% of people, well, let's talk about it in reality. It's leapt from 80% of people walking away without a diagnosis, and you've reduced that number by half. You've reduced it from 80% down to 40%. Now that's fabulous medicine, I reckon. So, that's the message. That's all I wanted to tell you this morning in reality, that genomic approaches can be used to identify causes for one of the most complex and difficult of our current sort of medical challenges. Now that boost in laboratory diagnosis takes us from about 20 to 30% using standard clinical means up to around about 60%. We're not perfect, but it's a downside better than what we've been doing. So where is this going to happen in New South Wales, do you think? It's going to happen here. And when will it happen, do you think? It's now. This is on the cards right now. And how did it happen? Because of you guys, through the generosity of the involved citizens of New South Wales. And who's it going to benefit? Just about the most vulnerable people in our society. Now, all of that's terribly admirable, and thank you very much.